All right. In our main segment, we want to talk a little bit about concert photography and learn some tips about that. I am the worst concert photographer on the planet, at least probably because I've never even been to a music concert. I'm sure I've heard like the squeaking orchestras and stuff, but I've never been to like a popular music kind of concert before. And my wife tells me I'm such a stiff, but I just have never done it before. So Nick, I know you shot some pretty big bands this week. How in the world did you get credentials to shoot? Because you like shot, wasn't Mumford and Sons there?
Yeah, there was Mumford and
That is
Sons,
awesome.
and maybe you've heard of the Foo Fighters, and the
Maybe.
Flaming Lips. Like there was some really large bands, and it was such a cool experience. The way that I got into this gig was that I shoot on occasion for a local magazine called Walla Walla Lifestyles magazine, and so that was my ticket in. So I contacted the promoter and I said, "Hey, I want to shoot
So
this."
is this like one of those free magazines that you see everywhere?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a free magazine that it's connected with the local paper, so it comes out
Okay.
monthly. It's a fairly popular magazine, but it's not like National Geographic or anything. It's
Okay.
it's a little bit, it's a couple rungs down maybe, but
Okay. Gotcha.
so that was my ticket in. That was my excuse to shoot the show, and
So did you ask the magazine if, hey, can I ask the bands if I go shoot, or did you have the magazine write a letter for you? How did it work?
nope, I didn't let them know because I didn't want them to say no. So I just
Okay. Sweet.
Okay.
as a photographer, like I end up contacting clients pretty often for the newspaper or for the magazine. So it's not totally out of left field that I did it, and I did this fully knowing that they would probably not be interested in doing any kind of article about the show because they don't really deal in the news. They deal with like looking forward rather than looking behind. So like
Gotcha.
so I just use that as an excuse. And I
Right.
about 6 months ago I started, uh, making contacts and trying to get my foot in the door. And I didn't know until about 3 days before the show that yes, I was going to have a press credential, and I was going to get to shoot all of the bands except for the Foo Fighters from the pit. So I got to shoot like 20 bands from like 5 feet away. And this festival had between 20 and 25,000 people in attendance. And it was
Whoa.
it was like Woodstock. It was so amazing, such a cool experience. And shooting the Mumford and Sons was amazing because they have one of the most high-tech lighting and stage setups. And it was just so much fun because every single frame that you take is completely different because the light is changing so fast. And
So what's the area like for photographers? Like where did you get to be? Yeah, I mean you have credentials, so where do you get to go?
that credential got me into the thing for free, which in itself was worth $200. So that was cool. And then I got to be in that area between the barrier where the people can't go any closer and the stage. So I
So
was
like spitting distance.
yes, oh yes, easily. And
Right.
so and I was right up against
Sweating distance.
I was right
Crowd surfer falls on your head distance.
exactly. And not to mention, like, I'm up against these huge subwoofers for this huge outdoor show. So, like, I was having heart palpitations with the beat because it was just so much bass. I can't even express how awesome it was because it was so loud.
And so how many photographers are there?
In the beginning, there wasn't very many. Like in the first part of the day, because this is an 2 days all day festival. So the bands that started at like noon were not super popular, but the bands that played at night were super popular. So there would be like 3 photographers in the pit in the beginning of the day, and by the end, like when Mumford and Sons played, there was like 35 photographers in a small
Wow.
area. So we all have, the way it works is you have 3 songs to get the shots you want, and then they kick you out. And so everybody is like on the clock. We're all like hurrying to get the shots that we want, and we're like all swapping lenses and going to the other side of the stage and getting shots from both sides and getting the wide shot from the center, and so we're all just like fighting over positions, and like and we have to shoot around the cameramen that were actually videotaping the performance. And there
Okay,
was,
so you're there. It's crazy. Tell me, what kind of camera settings did you start out with?
well, in the middle of the day, it's like ISO 200 and, 1/800th to 1/1250th of a second. At a lot of times I was shooting wide open just because my 70 to 200 is sharp, and middle of the day stuff was super easy. But as it got later in the evening and the stage lights start coming on, we're starting to talk about ISO 1600 to ISO 2000 area. And because they're moving, I had to use fairly fast shutter speed. So I was trying not to ever dip below like 1/400th of a second or so. And a lot of times I was shooting wide open in those situations. Like I said, the 70 to 200 is nice and sharp. But when I was doing the wider shots, I would stop down to like f4, f5.6 or something just to get everything sharp. And the shutter speed didn't matter quite as much when I'm shooting super wide. So,
Okay, so okay, I'm just like, I see you across the pit, and I'm like, hey, that's Nick Page. Nick, what camera settings do I use? Right?
yeah.
Like, it's night, everything's dark. We're in a live music hall, a bar, or whatever it is. Like, I know you always shoot in manual mode, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we're probably going to shoot wide open aperture just to gather light.
Yep.
And then what about a shutter speed?
Shutter speed, it depends on how energetic the band is, essentially. So like,
Okay.
if you're
How much headbanging are we talking about?
exactly, if you're shooting a speed metal band that is just like headbanging like crazy, and you want to freeze the action, you're going to be shooting at like 1/800th of a second and faster.
What is the shutter speed of a headbang?
Exactly.
All right. And then are you shooting super high ISO?
Because the stage lights were so dramatically bright, I didn't really have to in this case. But there was a venue that I shot at the day before that was an indoor venue with a metal band. So things are moving and it's really dark. And in those situations, I was clear up to ISO 8000, ISO 10,000, and it was rough. I was still not freezing the action, so you just kind of have to deal with a little bit of blur at that point because I don't want to push my ISO any higher than ISO 10,000. That's about as much as a 5D Mark III can do without like crying. So it was
okay. So, flights or, lights are flashing everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
People with epilepsy are freaking out.
Yep.
And, things are just going crazy in there. How are you shooting in manual mode and getting a consistent exposure between the shots? Because the light's changing all the time.
Well, I'm accounting for it in my head. So I get into a place where I know that I'm exposing for my highlights, which in this case is super important because the majority of your frame in these kind of shots is dark. But then you have these really bright rim lights and really bright beams of light coming through, and you don't want to overexpose those because once they're gone, they're pretty much gone. If you blow out a color channel, it's not going to come back. So I get to a place where I know that I'm not overexposing, and then if I see things get super bright, I either adjust quickly with my shutter speed and just kind of guess and take a picture and look at the back of my camera and see how close my guess was and then go from there because things are changing so fast that you just have to be fluid with it. So a lot of times, I get to that middle ground. If it gets really bright, I speed up my shutter speed. If it gets really dark, I slow it down because oftentimes if it gets really dark, the music kind of slowed down anyways and it's getting all like dramatic and moody. So they stop moving so fast as well. And so that slower shutter speed works. So that's kind of how it was. And
so did you find yourself using your Expo disc since you love that thing so much? Or?
Nice.
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah. We're getting all kinds of jabs on Nick today. It's great.
Yeah, it wasn't a great scenario for the Expo disc.
All right. So be honest. After you got the Expo disc and you bought it and said it was great, even though we heard the report and it was, I don't know how you said it was great because you'd only complained about it. How many times have you used it since then?
Do we really have to talk about this right now?
Death to gray cards. Those things are useless, baby.
One of these days, I will bust it out again, and I'm sure it'll perform brilliantly. But
I'm sure it will.
You should
we're
use
just
it in
busting
the
your
night
chops.
sky shootout that you're gonna have.
I should.
Yeah.
I will have a
use
nice
it then
gray
for sure.
sky.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, that's great. So I noticed as I looked through your photos, the photos were awesome, by the way, that you got from the concert.
Yeah,
I mean,
very good.
just some really, really cool stuff. A lot of them are just dramatically underexposed from what, the camera would get on auto, where you're trying to
Right.
get everything in the picture to have detail. I mean, there's a lot of 80-85% of the picture is black, and then we're
Yeah.
getting like this little rim light around the person, and the effect is super, super cool. Did you find that you were shooting mostly in that style to get kind of just the edges of people and a lot of darkness in the photo, kind of a very low key thing, or was that just kind of the style that ended up working the best?
Well, I guess it's a result of when I was shooting with my highlight alert on, and I was being very careful not to
The blinkies, I hate
know.
those things.
I know.
I have them on too.
But this
I
was
love
a great example for that, because if I overexpose those, they're not going to come back, and I'm just going to ruin the shot. And I don't want to have these snow white halos in a shot where they should obviously be, have some kind of color to them. So I was making sure to expose for the highlights, because obviously any kind of auto mode, like even aperture priority or shutter priority or anything like that, it would have been so utterly confused by what was going on. My camera probably would have just went up in smoke, because the lights were changing so fast that none of those modes would have even kind of worked. It would have just overexposed everything. So I was shooting in manual and making sure that I was not getting too many blinkies. The trick is you want to get some, but not too many, because you can recover some. You can recover, what is it, like a stop and a half or something with the highlight slider when you're shooting raw. So I was kind of keeping that in mind.
Not only that, but the highlights are going to be showing off of a JPEG.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because the camera's not looking at the RAW. So that's why you can recover so much on RAW. It has a lot more room than the JPEG blinkies will show.
Right. So I was exposing the photo as much as I could without losing detail. And in most cases, I really didn't edit the photos too heavily at all. I was just adding some contrast. This was one of the situations where I actually did add a little bit of clarity. I'm actually an anti-clarity slider guy. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I hate the clarity slider. Yeah. Those are
Do you have
fighting words,
support
right?
groups?
Exactly. Yeah. We meet on Thursdays. But in this case,
it's not
it was
this group.
no, it's definitely not this group.
Yeah, I love clarity. So.
But in this case, it was really nice because it brought out some of the texture of all the smoke and stuff that was, creating the nice ambient effect. So yeah, that's about
Very
it.
cool. And what was your most used lens?
70 to 200, because
Did you just glue it on, or do you even use other things?
oh yeah, I definitely used other things. I had my Trinity with me. I had my 16 to 35, 28 to 70, and 70 to 200 in my bag with me. And most of the time, I never needed the 16 to 35 because it was such a large stage. I would say it was 6 feet tall, and it was probably 6 feet
6
away
feet, that's
from
what,
me.
2 meters.
Right. And
I'm
so
always feeling for our international audience.
yeah, I know. Exactly. And
Good job.
yeah, but they'll know Mumford and Sons. They're a British band. But anyways,
Oh, there you go.
so 16 to 35 was just like a little bit ridiculously wide. Like I could almost shoot behind me. I was angling up so much. So 28 to 70 and the 70 to 200 were my most used lenses.
Cool. So did you make any mistakes? Anything you regret from shooting?
I'm flawless. I don't know if I ever make mistakes.
You are flawless, except for that Expo Disc thing.
I think I gave up on the shows a little bit too early. Like I was in such a hurry to be the first to post some of the photos from the show that I left before they were over, and I missed really cool opportunities because I only got to shoot from the pit for 3 songs each, and then the rest of the night I could just shoot from out in the crowd, and which is really difficult because essentially I would have to go out in the middle of this sea of people and then try to pre-focus on the person on the stage through the people using back button focus. And then I would throw it into live view and then hold it up above my head and shoot just like everybody else with their cell phones. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've held a 70-200 with a battery grip up above your head for very long, but it
Yeah.
gets old really quick. And so
Yeah.
I shot a few
Did you at
songs
least
like
crowd
that.
surf to the spot?
You know, I don't think that anybody wanted that. I don't think I judged the group and they didn't look up to it. So I didn't.